In today's video, I'm going to go over the Archery site. I'm going to show you how to move the site correctly. I'm going to show you some tips and tricks that I've learned over the years that'll really help you out. And I'm going to add in a few different things in case you're struggling to get far enough or enough distance out of your site setup. That is going to be very helpful since outdoor season is upon us. So I haven't done a video specifically about sites yet, how to move them, the different movements and adjustments that the sites do have, some things that I've learned over the years on how to make some adjustments, and a few different hacks actually that I've learned on how to gain a little bit of extra distance. That is very important because outdoor season's upon us. You know, people are going to go outside and shoot a lot further outside than they do inside, especially in younger age groups and those that shoot lighter draw weights. This is really important to know a few of these different tips to be able to get some extra distance without necessarily having to go up in bow weight a whole lot. So the Archery site comes in many different shapes and sizes. This happens to be one of the top of the line sites that has a long extension bar, but for the most part, at least the movement portion of this video will apply to just about any style of archery site. That could be for compound recurve or any other style that is using any sort of actual aiming reference that has movements and adjustability. So first thing, I'm going to go over how to actually move and adjust your site and what you're looking for and how you're looking to adjust the site itself. In archery, when we move our site, you want to move it when the arrows are no longer grouping in the middle of the target when you are aiming at it. Now this may seem like, yes, obviously this is how you're supposed to be doing it, but it's actually funny. Sometimes in young archers, they have different ways of going about things where if they aim in the middle and their sight pin's in the middle and they shoot a good shot, all of their arrows hit low, say in the blue. Many people won't even move their sight, they'll just aim high in the blue and make the arrows hit in the middle. That does work, but what works better is moving and adjusting your sights to actually make the groups shift on the target. You may laugh and you may think that of course you're supposed to be moving your sight and that's why it's adjustable, but I can't tell you how many young kids I have worked with where I'm like, okay, you're hitting low, move their sight down. Okay, you're hitting low, move your sight down. Okay, and it just never changes. And then I finally ask, so how are you aiming? I'm using the tip of my arrow. We have a sight, we should use the sight. So, I feel like I can't gloss over that. It's important to mention because, it's just easily overlooked by some people, especially people who are new. So we always use the sight pin here on this sight as a reference to put in the middle of the target to aim with. And then when our arrows are grouping that are not in the middle, and you notice you're always hitting right or left or high or low, these adjustments are there for a reason for you to adjust to make the arrows then group in the middle or land near the middle of the target when you're aiming at it. So some important things to note about shooting archery and moving your sight is if your groups are all hitting low on the target, you will move your sight down. You always follow the arrow. If you are grouping high above the center of the target, you will move your sight up if it moves. And that is your general principle, is you always follow the arrow. If you're hitting right, you move your sight to the right. If you're hitting left, you move your sight to the left. If you're hitting low left, you move your sight down and to the left. And if you're not sure which direction your knobs move your sight, if you have a micro adjustable sight like this one is here, move it. You can play with it and watch it. You can turn the knob and see which direction it moves and then turn it back the other direction the same amount of clicks. You can count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 clicks, and oh, it moved to the right. And I'll move it back those 10 clicks. Now it's exactly where it was again. Get comfortable with moving your sight. Being able to feel how the adjustment works and being just overall comfortable with moving your sight, in my opinion, is extremely important because especially in a tournament situation, if you're grouping slightly low, you need to move that sight sooner than later, get comfortable with its movement, get comfortable with how much the arrows adjust on the target as you're moving the sight, and it really will pay off in the long run, especially if you're keeping score in a competition. So the general adjustments, very straightforward, just follow the arrow. Now, some other things that are important to note is the amount of movement that you get out of the sight. Most basic budget level sites will not have these micro adjustable clicks. They will then have a large macro adjustment where you just move it largely up and down. They won't have the micro adjustment left or right either, and you may just need to spin the pin in or out, left or right, to make your adjustments. Also, cheaper sites tend to not have an extension, or at least really club level sites don't. They're mounted directly on the bow and they just kind of sit right here. So you don't really have that adjustment in or out. This one actually does. You can adjust this by loosening the knob and sliding it forward and back, depending on what you like. The forward and back position affects the balance of the bow ever so slightly, but more importantly, in my opinion, what it does is it ends up making things a little bit more precise. The further out you can put it, generally the better, because then the dot becomes a little bit smaller, the sight pin, and also the movement becomes a little bit more apparent to the user. But something that's critically important is where the sight bar is has to be the same, especially if you have gone through the trouble of marking the distances that you need to shoot, like I have here on the site, and you'll see that there is a bunch of different distances marked here with different lines, because this site is set up for field archery, so I shoot many different distances. Now, where that is on the tape there really is 100% defined and dictated by where the bar is here. If I were to mount the bar here normally, get sighted in and make my sight tape or make my marks, but then the next time put it here, my sight marks are not the same at all. Now, how does this affect and where does the arrow actually hit? Well, I just know from experience, and I can tell you the sight bar all the way out like this versus the sight bar all the way in like this. When it is in this position, you will hit dramatically higher on the target. So this is important to note because you can use it to your advantage. Like I was saying earlier in the intro of the video, if you're a youth archer or an archer shooting lower bow weight and you're really struggling to get that extra distance because your sight pin is either all the way down on the sight bar and you can no longer adjust the vertical adjustment down any further and you've run out of room, or more importantly and more critically, if you were to put an arrow on the string, you would see that when the sight pin is in this very far down position, the arrow would not clear the bow. It would hit the sight pin, and you can't have that happen. That's a safety hazard, and clearly it'll affect your accuracy and your performance. So when that happens and your sight pin is as close as it can be to the arrow without hitting it, how do you get further distance without just aiming above the target? You actually just loosen this up, slide the sight bar in, and when you do that, you'll actually gain a whole lot more height and you'll end up being able to shoot much further. It makes a big difference, so you might want to start up closer as you do this adjustment, or move it in slow increments to make sure that you're not missing the target if you're looking to get that extra distance, and it can be very helpful. I used to have to do this even as an adult, shooting 90 meters and shooting somewhere in the neighborhood of 45 to 46 pounds. I had to slide my sight bar in because of, just the features of my body, plus the arrow build that I was using at the time. I had to slide the sight bar in order to hit the target at 90 meters without having to aim high. It was a big pain in the butt, but you gotta do what you gotta do when you need to get that extra distance. What happens if you're only shooting 30 pounds and you need to reach 90 meters? Or if you're only shooting 25 pounds and you need to reach 70 meters? Well, you can go even further in than this. Yes, I can slide the sight bar in further like this. However, what if I need to go even further and I've totally run out of room? You'll note that on this sight bar, there is a bunch of different detents here. So there's spots for this locking mechanism to lock down in a given place. But if I've run out of room all the way back like this, how can you get even more distance? Well, take it off, you turn it around backwards, you move the string out of the way, and you tighten that bad boy back down. Now look how close it is to your eye. Obviously you need to move it down the other direction. You can get a whole lot of distance, a whole lot more distance with your sight bar on backwards like this. It's a little crazy, it looks ridiculous, but I've done it. I've done it as a youth archer, and I've had to do it with several of my students as well. The only thing that you need to do to make sure that you're good to go here is to make sure you have enough clearance between the string and the sight pin, because as you go to let go of the arrow, the string is coming this way, right? Well, the string goes past zero, past brace height, quite a considerable amount, and it will hit the sight pin. So that might be a little bit too far back, you know, maybe somewhere in here to start, give or take. Give yourself a good cushion there to make sure you don't hit the sight pin with your string. If you turn your sight around backwards like this and you have it set up and adjusting, and all of a sudden you start hearing funky noises, instead of hearing, you know, just a normal kind of sound of the bow, something's loose in the bow. I think the limb bolt's not locked down. I've been making adjustments on this bow. But instead of a normal sound like this, you start hearing something really, really, really off, like, you know, what I'm about to show you here. That sounds way different. You're probably hitting your sight pin, so you want to give it a little bit of extra room and tighten it back down. Now when you do that, depending on where you have this sight bar mounted on the sight rail, you may need to make adjustments here, or have a secondary one handy that has it in the position that you can still use it. Because as you can see, all the way down in this position is all the way up on the sight pin. So if you have it drop down a whole lot, you may not be able to get enough height when it is in reverse. So that's a really helpful thing for people who are struggling to really reach far distances, is move your sight bar in, and if you really need to, turn it around backwards. You'll get a lot more distance, and especially if you're a youth archer and you're shooting low draw weights and short draw lengths, and you really want to be able to shoot further distances, because if you just got into archery and you're realizing, holy cow, I need to shoot 50 meters outside, and you just got done learning how to shoot 18 meters inside, that's a much further distance to get, and you can reach it by moving that sight bar in or flipping it around backwards. Now, which direction the sight moves is generally all the same. If I were to look at the micro adjustable click left to right, and I were to look at it in this manner, facing the adjustment knob, the direction that the top portion of the knob rotates towards is the direction the sight pin is moving. So if I rotate the top towards the right, clockwise, it's moving my sight to the right. If I move the top towards the left, counterclockwise, it moves the sight to the left. That would move the arrow to the right. So the arrow moves the opposite direction that you move the sight. That's why I always say, follow the arrow. If you're hitting right, move your sight right. Now for the vertical adjustment knob, generally speaking, they are all the same again. And I like to adjust on the bottom knob. That's just the way I've learned. You can adjust on the top knob if you like. Most Excel sights like this one only have the adjustment on the top and not the bottom, but I've learned that I move it from the bottom because that's the way I started while shooting archery, and I just keep it that way. And I know that if I take this knob and I turn the side that is away from the arrow away from me towards the target, it moves the sight pin down. If I move it back towards me, it moves the sight pin up. Something that may be helpful for you is to actually take a Sharpie or something, a Sharpie because it's permanent, but you can take it off with some rubbing alcohol. And you can draw an arrow on the sight. If you point the arrow forward and then point an arrow down, that means if you turn the knob forward, it moves the sight down. You can draw those references on your sight if you'd like, to give you reminders, especially if you're new to this, which direction you turn the knobs moves the sight. Totally legal in the rule book, and you can do that, and I would encourage you to do so. Now, how much you move your sight is an individual factor. It has to do with you and really only you. The difference in distance from your eye to the sight pin from archer to archer is going to cause different amounts of movement to make the arrow move differently on the target. You could calculate how much you need to move your sight to move your arrow if you measured the distance from your eye to the sight pin and then that distance in relation to the distance of you to the target. That's a lot of math, and that takes some time. Or you can just move your sight 10 clicks and shoot a group after you've had a group before, measure the distance and difference on the target, and then you'll approximately know about how much 10 clicks moves you, or something along that nature. Some of these sights are very, very fine. This one right here is one of the finest clicks on the market as far as one click. How much does this sight pin move? It only moves 1.5 thousandths of an inch each click. Some move 5/1000ths of an inch each click, and some move even bigger than that because of, you know, quality and price points. So you can learn and adjust and figure that out on your own at home. How much does each click move an arrow on the target? And you can use that to your advantage, because maybe your first shot is a low blue, and instead of 3 clicks, shoot it, still low blue, now I'm low red, now I'm low. That's a lot of time and a lot of arrows. You could go, I'm low blue, let's see here, I'm at 70 meters, I'm gonna give it, I'm at least gonna be in the gold now. Now, as far as a little tip and trick that I figured out, besides moving that sight bar in or out, if you are out of your range of adjustment on your windage here, your left to right, say if it's fully pegged all the way to the inside, all the way to the right, so the sight movement and adjustment, it's out of adjustment to the right. I can't move it any more to the right, but my groups are still to the right. What do you do? Well, here on the sight pin, you can see there's a little nut there on the sight pin there. What you would want to do is you would want to loosen that nut and then adjust the sight pin into the right, but then you want to move the sight block back to the left, so that way you're back into your adjustment. You don't want to just move the sight pin to the right enough to make the group go into the middle, because you're out of your windage adjustment here. You want to say, okay, I want to be in the middle of my adjustment and have the sight pin adjusted for the windage to be back in this position. How do you do that? Another way to say that would be, right now I'm grouping and I'm hitting slightly to the right. Okay, maybe we'll say 8 ring right on a colored face. And I want to move my sight pin and my sight block back to the center of the adjustment. Well, if I do that, I will count how many turns I am turning this knob to get it back to the center, and then I will turn this sight pin that same amount of turns to the opposite direction. It's a little bit confusing, but if my sight block is maxed out to the right, I will turn it to the left to get this sight block in the middle. And if you do that and you count how many turns the actual knob turns, and then you do the same amount of turns on this sight pin, it'll put you back in the exact same spot. That's because the majority of sight manufacturers make the thread that is a left to right windage adjustment be the same exact thread pitch that is in the sight pin. This sight pin is a recurve sight pin, and it's an 832 thread, and a compound sight is a 1032 thread. So what does that mean is 8 and 10 are different sizes, 10's bigger, 8's smaller, but 32 is how many threads per inch. So 32 denotes 32 threads per inch lengthwise on this. And this adjustment in the windage block is also a 32 pitch, when it looks like it is a 8 or a 6 32 inside that sight bar. Not every one is the same, meaning every manufacturer and not every sight has that feature, but the higher quality, the higher end sights have that. For this exact purpose. If I'm out of adjustments to the right, I can just loosen this nut, spin it towards the right, say 5 turns, that will equal this knob going back the other direction, 5 turns. Now my sight is exactly in the same place, and I will hit 8 ring right as well. So now I can just, there, now I'll be in the middle. So that's a really basic rundown of an archery sight, some different adjustments and different features on how moving the sight, making the adjustments affects your groups, how adjusting the sight bar in or out affects impact, tricks on how to get extra distance, and tricks on how to make these adjustments a little more precise and a little more consistent, so that way it's less frustrating to you and you're spending less time chasing that grouping and more time shooting tens.